Should be good to go. All right, Kevin, welcome to Dope Nostalgia. My name is Naomi, and I thank you once again for being here with us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now, when I think about Candlebox, I always think about them being like a straight ahead rock band. Now, with you guys hitting the charts in around 93, looking at the location and the timing where you were starting, are you guys considered a grunge band?
Well, I think that in certain camps we probably were, but I think that mainly just be guilty by association or environmental closeness. Being from Seattle, I think that was just a label that everybody got, but we always kind of considered ourselves just a blues-based rock band. I mean, everything that we've done, even when we started, the foundation was always on blues-based chord progressions and stuff like that. And we rarely, I mean, we're still in standard tuning, even to this day, and we only ever down tuned to drop D, like I think maybe in our entire career 7 songs. So it wasn't ever really like Alice in Chains is drop D, and Soundgarden had several songs that were drop D and I believe C.
Yeah,
but we never did that. We're just always kind of a standard rock band.
And a lot of standard rock bands do that. So yeah, that's always the impression I got. So when I was doing some research about you guys and I kept seeing the word grunge thrown around, I was kind of surprised by it.
Yeah, it never really, I mean, listen, it's, I think it was just a term that was adopted by the media. You have to name something in order to get people to pay attention. I don't know, maybe that's kind of why the Chicago music scene never really took off, because at the same time, there was great bands coming out of Chicago, or even Illinois for that matter. But there was never really a label given to that. So maybe that's why it didn't succeed.
And it's radio too. Radio needs to have some platform to put the band on, which is understandable, I guess. But it's better not to label. I agree. Who were your musical heroes growing up? Your influences?
Influences and inspiration. I mean, there's so many. Otis Redding's kind of always been my favorite singer. Love Led Zeppelin, The Clash. The Clash is my favorite band of all time. I grew up on punk rock, so Dead Kennedys, Butthole Surfers, stuff like that. The Germs was one of my favorite bands. I just kind of, I guess it was probably mainly because I was the youngest in my family. The formative years for me were from like 1978 to 1984. And at the time I was living in San Antonio, Texas, and there was a great punk scene that was moving through Texas. And, I guess there was the DC punk scene, the New York punk scene, the Texas punk scene, and the California punk scene. So that's kind of the influence really took over at a very young age for me. And I had an older sister that listened to bands like the Cars and Ramones and stuff like that. So I gravitated towards that. And I've always loved Blondie. She's always been kind of one of my favorite bands and favorite singers. So that's kind of where my heroes come from. I never really emulated any of that. I played drums in a punk band, but I never really, I didn't want to be a singer in a rock band for sure. This is kind of like the reluctant lead singer job for me.
Is it one of those cases where there was nobody else to fill the spot, so you went for it?
No, I was just a friend of mine asked me to sing on some demos. He'd heard me singing, hey kitty. He heard me singing at parties and stuff, just a good friend that was doing some demos. He was trying to start a band and asked me to sing on them. And Scott Mercado, who was an acquaintance of mine, was asked by Rick as well to kind of play drums on it. So that's how Scott and I met. And I sang on these demos, and then that ended up becoming a band called Uncle Duke, which became Candlebox. And then I've been stuck with this job ever since.
And weren't you guys the first successful artist signed to Maverick Records?
Yes, we were the first band signed to Maverick, and the first successful band. Then I think Deftones were after us, and then Alanis, and then the Deftones. I can't recall.
Now, this being Madonna's label, And I'm sure that there were a lot of other people involved, of course. How involved was she back then?
To be honest with you, I don't think she was really that involved. It was purely a vanity label for her. I mean, I
Yeah.
know Freddie DeMann, who was managing her at the time, he was also managing Lionel Richie, and had just come off of managing Michael Jackson.
Mhm.
Had approached Lionel Richie with the partnership with Maverick Records, and Lionel wasn't interested. And Madonna was like, "Yeah, I'll throw $10 million at it." So I think they started the label together, Freddie and Madonna,
Mhm.
with Warner Brothers. But I don't really think she had much to do with. I mean, she certainly didn't have anything to do with signing us. It was Freddie and Guy Oseary.
Mhm.
We didn't actually even meet her until April of '94. So it was, we got signed in the fall of '92 and didn't meet Madonna until April of '94. So yeah, I don't think it was really something that she felt great responsibility for. I will tell you this though, she was a great label owner. When we were in need of things early on, there was never a question asked, and it was always like, yeah, give them whatever they need. So I guess those are the kind of bosses you really want.
Mhm.
And then of course, as the label grew and got bigger and bigger and bigger, I think she probably certainly wanted to take more responsibility for what was happening and was more involved with maybe the signings or listening to the music of the bands that they were interested in. I know they went after Marilyn Manson really, really hard, and she was instrumental in kind of flying to Orlando to meet with Manson, and again with the Prodigy as well. I know that she was super instrumental in making that happen. So that kind of came, after us and the success of Candlebox and Alanis Morissette. But early on, I don't. Long story short, I don't think she really knew what was going to happen with the label.
Okay. Yeah, and then from what I understand now, it's Maverick still exists, but it's more of like a management agency by Guy Oseary now.
Yeah, exactly. The label folded into Warner Brothers, I think, in 2010 or 2012.
Mm.
They're certainly not signing any bands and putting records out, but yeah, the management company is huge. Guy, he found us when he was 19 or 20, about to turn 21. And it was just a really hungry young kid with great vision. And, the success that he's produced for himself over the past 30 years is mind-boggling. I mean, he's best friends with Irving Azoff, and and he manages Madonna, and he manages everybody, and I think Pharrell's partners with him in some stuff. I mean, it's pretty amazing what he's been able to do for himself. But the label, sadly, I think right around 2000, 2002 is where it really lost its vision. And that happens. I mean, I think that with vanity labels, when they become very, very successful, I don't really know that they know how to manage themselves, if you will. The artists continue to produce, but there's so much great success that everybody kind of loses sight as to what they started out doing. And I think that Maverick was sadly one of those labels that happened to. I mean, if you look at Sire Records, or for that matter, 4AD, as examples of labels that were started out with one vision and continued to produce that one vision. Those labels had great success, even up to right around 2002 and 2004. Maverick was supernova, if you will, and I think that's kind of what happened with them.
And of course, like outside influences, like the landscape changing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So at what point in your success as a band do you get a road crew and like a drum tech, a guitar tech? At what point does it go from playing
Fun,
the local clubs, hauling your gear into the venue yourself, to all that changing?
from fun to work. I mean, stupidly way too early for us. When we first started touring, everybody had to have their own tech. It was ridiculous. Scott, our drummer, had a tech. Pete, our guitar player, had a tech. Barty, our bass player, had a tech. We had a sound guy. We had a tour manager. It was, there were 8 of us in a van. It was ridiculous. And that was, you know, from April of 1993 all the way to January or February of 94. We traveled like that. So it was not the smartest thing to do. You know, financially really wasn't, but you know, we also had great success early on. So that kind of allowed for it. I think it kind of got out of control on the second record when we showed up in the Midwest to start the tour for Lucy, and we had 3 semis and 5 tour buses, and I immediately called my manager. I'm like, this is just way too much. This is the stupidest thing we could ever. We're spending $100,000 a day on a tour that doesn't even, you know, it's ridiculous. I mean, of course, we'd sold out, you know, all the first 10 venues, but I mean, it's just that's just not where we came from. And we actually fired our agent over the whole thing, because we initially had discussed going out and doing just theaters to reacclimate the band with the audience, and management and an agent went against us and chose to do something different. And that's not, you know, it's kind of our fault as well for not really paying attention to our tour books and the things that we knew were coming up. But yeah, it was a bit of a shocker to show up and see that many things on tour with us for a band who'd only had one album that, you know, at that point it only sold like, you know, 3 million copies. It hadn't even reached 4 million at that point. So yeah, it was a bit stupid.
Do you think it's preferable to play for those crowds and those theater size crowds just for the intimacy of it?
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I've been in theaters now for the past, about 20 years. And you know, I listen, when we get to play arenas and stuff like that, it's amazing. Or outdoor festivals and 30,000 people, it's brilliant. Yeah. But I love the intimacy of the theaters. I'm a very hands-on performer, and you know, I love the audience, and I love the opportunity. You know, we played one of the places we've been trying to get back to for years and years and years is the Commodore Ballroom in Vancouver. Oh, wow. It's just a special place, and we've only ever played there twice. And I love it there. It's like the Roseland Ballroom in Portland is very similar. This setup is great. It's perfect for crowds. It's great for the artist. And that's kind of what I prefer doing.
Mm-hmm. I imagine that you probably got to spend more time in Vancouver back in the day. Are you still located in Seattle?
No, I left Seattle in '98. I moved down to Los Angeles. But yeah, when my dad moved us there in 1984, and by 86 and 87, I was up there all the time for concerts. I saw the Chili Peppers on New Year's Eve at Graceland in 1986 or 87, 86, 87. I can't remember. I saw Cabaret Voltaire, Front 242, Chris and Cozy, a lot of those bands, either at Love Affair or Graceland or Commodore Ballroom and stuff like that. Yeah, I loved going up there. And then every Christmas and every winter I was up at Blackcomb and Whistler snowboarding. So it's nice. one of my favorite places in Canada, Vancouver.
Yeah. No, I'm located out of Edmonton, so it's
beautiful. I've been there as well.
12-hour drive to Vancouver. It's been a while since we've been out there. But yeah.
Edmonton's great. I've been there for the rodeo a couple times, and then I would do like Banff Springs for, you know, snowboarding as well. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. No, it's pretty cool to be this close to the Rockies. Pretty beautiful.
Yeah. Stunning.
Now, Metal Edge magazine, which was a staple in my life back in the day. 1994, you guys won the Reader's Choice for Best New Band. Were you a reader of Metal Edge yourself?
No, I wasn't really a magazine guy. I mean, I had Rolling Stone and stuff like that. And of course, growing up, Cream magazine and whatnot was kind of a staple for me, but you know, it was more so I was like the fanzine kid, you know, being such a fan of punk rock music, fanzines were kind of what I really got into. I knew Jerry, and she was she actually recently passed away. But she was kind of one of the people from Metal Edge that early on took us under her wing and took great care of us and made sure that we got, you know, good layouts in the magazine or good stories. But I didn't really, magazines weren't kind of my thing. I was like, oh, that's cool, you know, great. I mean, it's, you know, the fans, when the fans appreciate you, it's way more gratifying than, you know, some sort of trophy from, you know, a bunch of people that, you know, probably got paid to put you up there, you know, the Grammys or whatever, which is, I mean, you know, an example of you know, great way of disrespecting an artist's talent is, you know, not giving Grammys based on, you know, the success of a record. You know, what happened with The Weeknd last year. I mean, it's ridiculous. And that's kind of the world that, you know, we live in as musicians is the fans aren't, the importance of the fan and what they mean to your music. It doesn't translate when it comes to, you know, the real career you have outside of, you know, I guess maybe I'm speaking from a social networking kind of thing, but you know, you can have all this movement and fans love you, and then you can't get, you know, a single on radio, and you've got, you know, 50,000 streams per week of your song, and radio won't play it because they're not getting paid to, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, you know, a trophy or an accolade from the Grammys or, you know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or something like that is irrelevant, because ultimately the only people that matter to your career are the people that are paying for it. And those are the fans that love what you do. So when we got that award with Metal Edge, I think that we were all kind of shocked, because we didn't think that anybody in that kind of realm, the world of magazines or the media, really got us or understood us. So it was a bit of a shock. And of course, the same thing happened with Rolling Stone magazine. I think Pete our guitar player was recognized as like the best new up and coming guitar player by the fans, the readers poll. So those are great things, you know. But again, I wasn't really the type of person that sat around and, you know, ran to the store to buy, you know, Circus or Metal Edge or Cream or Rolling Stone. It wasn't my thing.
Understandably so. But yes, I can understand that if it's from the fans, it means more than anything. I don't even know if the criteria for the Grammys is the same as it was when in the beginning, because some of the nominations nowadays just make you shake your head.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, you laugh at Jethro Tull and AC/DC or Metallica best metal album, you know, Jethro Tull. It's like, what are you talking about? And those types of things. But, you know, I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know, but with the Grammys, you can actually pay $25,000 to be on the ballot. And if your label really wants you to get some attention, they can pay for that sort of thing. And that's where I have a problem with it. I mean, I just, you know, I didn't get into music certainly to get Grammys. I didn't even know about them until, you know, I released an album, and all of a sudden people were talking about Grammys, and, you know, you could be nominated for a Grammy. I was like, I don't even know what that is. But, you know, certainly if I had one, I'd be, you know, proud of it. But then again, at the same time, I wouldn't even know where it came from, you know. Did the label pay for it? You know, is it really? And, you know, it's kind of the same thing with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, the fact that Soundgarden is still not in there, but Pearl Jam is, the Foo Fighters are, and the Chili Peppers and all this other kind of, you know, rock and roll music. I think it's just, it's doing a great disservice. Those types of entities or businesses are doing a great disservice to what rock and roll really is.
I hear more about who should be inducted in and who isn't than I do about who is in there. Like, because of the fact that there's people there that deserve to be and haven't received that accolade yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, back when TV shows, variety shows, all of that were going on, you guys got to do any of those appearances? And who were some of your favorite shows to visit?
Letterman was great. We did Letterman 3 times, and he was just awesome. One of the nicest Coolest guys ever, and a lot of fun to play the Ed Sullivan Theater. We did that 3 times. We also did the Jon Stewart show for MTV. Yeah, I mean, we never did Leno or Conan or any of those. By the time our third record came out, people had already moved on from Candlebox. So, it was really, we're now just a fan-based, rock and roll band. And thank God we have fans that still listen to us and buy our records. But back in the day, I mean, I would just have to say that Letterman was an absolute blast. And it was always just a pleasure to see him. And he would always come to the dressing room and have conversations and how's the band, what's going on, how's touring, thanks for being here. Just, those types of things. And, that's a real treat when you're a touring rock band and you're hoping that someone's paying attention to what you're doing outside of the people that are looking after your career.
Agreed. He seems like a fantastic man. Like,
Mm.
I mean, I love his dry, witty humor to begin with, but like just the fact that he seems very involved with the people he's having as his guests, which is nice.
Yeah, he gets really into it. I know when we were booked, he personally chose us, and I mean, he loved the Seattle music scene, which was great. He also loved what was going on in Chicago and New York. But I think Eddie Vedder's like one of his best friends. So yeah, he just was always a hands-on kind of. It's the same with Howard Stern. He's very into the 90s rock and roll, and those are. That's who I care about. If Howard Stern talks about Candlebox, it's the greatest, day of my life when I hear him talk about it. And it was similar with Letterman. Just a great guy and cared greatly about the artists that he had on a show.
Of the albums you put out in that decade, what was your personal favorite?
God, I don't really like those first 3 albums. I mean, there are songs on each one that I love, but I don't think I really understood who I was as a musician until the 2000s. So if I had to choose from the the 90s, I would say Happy Pills was probably my favorite because it's got some of the most creative music we've ever made as a band or ever had made as a band up to that point. So
what would be a deep cut or an album track that you recorded off that you wish could have been a single?
God, Stone's Throw Away. Listen, it's far too long of a song, but I just absolutely love that track. I thought that leading off with It's All Right was a bad move. I always kind of thought that, Happy Pills would have been like a great first single for us to release because it had so much kind of attitude to it. And it was with kind of the vein of metal that was happening at the time, Alice in Chains and Korn and that sort of thing, that it was a song that would have generated a lot more interest. But I know the label was trying to direct us into kind of the realm of a pop rock band like Train and that sort of thing that was happening. So that's when it kind of became difficult with the label, when the arguing started happening and the back and forth of pissing one another off because the label wasn't listening to us and we weren't listening to the label. But yeah, I think that A Stone's Throw Away off of Happy Pills would have been a great first single, or a great single in general. But I do Happy Pills and Stone's Throw are my 2 favorite songs on that record, and I still play them to this day in the sets. But like on Lucy, the deep cut on that record for me that I wish would have been a single was Butterfly Reprise, the closing track of the album. But again, it's not really a single; it's an album track, and in the vein of a Whole Lot of Love or something like Led Zeppelin or Stairway to Heaven, there's just so much movement and action in those types of songs. And that's what I really loved about Candlebox, is when we got away from trying to write songs that were radio friendly tracks. Into the Sun, our 4th record, which was released in 2008, that's my probably my ultimate Candlebox record, and should have been our second album, because it's just it has everything that the band needed that we didn't have at the time. You know, in 93 and 94 and 95, we weren't that experienced of musicians. And when the band broke up in 2000 till 2006, we, you know, all of us musically grew a lot artistically and creatively. And so when we got back together to make that album, we took all of that influence that we had from everything that we'd worked on, and created and put it into one album. So it's a pretty spectacular record, if I do say so myself, and a lot of magic on that record. So that's probably, you know, the turning point for me as a musician, and as a songwriter was into design.
That's a beautiful thing, though, when you can take that break and do what you need to do to grow as an artist, and just being able to bring it all back together with the same group of people.
Yeah.
I can understand why that would be so great. What were you doing during that time?
I was doing the High Watts. I had a side project called the High Watts. I was producing. I was, you know, just doing things to keep myself busy. You know, and I was writing with other songwriters, and you know, just kind of doing what you do as an artist. I mean, we were trying to get, you know, trying to get our band back on track. You know, there was a situation with Maverick Records when we left the label that, you know, the termination wasn't allowing for certain usage of the name, and, you know, that kind of stuff that happened. So, you know, trying everything I could to kind of stay afloat.
And you were going to say something. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off with another question, but
no, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I was just mentioning about how everyone was able to get back together with all that newfound, you know, artistry.
Well, what I was going to say was, you know, when you start to realize who the songwriters are, and you can embrace that and respect it, it makes it a lot easier to produce great music. Early on, everybody thought they were songwriters, but I've written the lyrics from album 1 till album 7, every single line, and I've been the main melody writer for the band since day one, and I write the majority of the choruses. So I think that battle from album 1 to album 3 of you know, who's the songwriter, it was irrelevant, because we shared everything equally as a band. Everything was split 25%, because that's ultimately what I wanted to have that career where we were around 30, 40 years later and still the original band. But that wasn't the case, because, you know, ego is a really, really challenging thing when it comes to being in a band, and it can be, sometimes it can be great for it, but most of the time it's very destructive, and it ended up breaking up the band, unfortunately. So by the time we got back together in 2008, the conversation that I had with the guys was, listen, we know what we do, we know who does what, let's just not argue over it and see what we can produce. And that's how we were able to produce an album like Into the Sun. Was the positions were recognized as what the positions were. I'm the singer, I'm the lyricist, I'm the melody writer. Pete's the guitar player that writes 30-40% of the songs. Scott, you're the drummer, and Barty, you're the bass player. And let's move forward. And that's, you know, and that's what we did.
That's smart. Did you have any personnel changes along the way?
I've had tons of personnel changes. Yeah,
I always see these things on Wikipedia, but I don't always take Wikipedia as gospel. So I always have to ask.
Yeah, we didn't write our Wikipedia, so that's probably why it's true.
Anyone can write your Wikipedia. That's the problem.
Yeah, no, Scott left in 96 or 97. Dave Cruzen joined the band for Happy Pills. Then we broke up in 99 or 2000. Pete and I went out with Rob Reddick, Robbie Allen, and Shannon Larkin for like a 6-week tour that was just not a good idea. The band went away, got back together in 2006 as the original band, Pete, Barty, and Scott. and myself. And then Barty left in 2007 because he had passed the bar and he was a lawyer. And why would you go out on the road with a rock and roll band if you're an attorney? So then we had Adam Curry, who'd been playing with me with the Hiwatts, join the band, and Adam's been with me since 2003. And Pete and Scott left in 2016, and I've had Adam, Memphis, Brian Island, and Robin Diaz, and now I have another drummer, a guy named BJ Kerwin. So yeah, we're just kind of like you know, Candlebox is not a sum of its parts. It's really it's the whole.
Right.
So, and I don't think anybody really gives a shit who's playing our music, just as long as I get to hear it.
Hey, exactly. What's the process like for the band when you start playing shows live, bringing the new energy of the new members into the fold?
Well, I mean, we do obviously rehearsals, but generally what it is whoever comes into the band is usually a friend of somebody else's. So, you know, that's been the nice thing is that, and you know, of course, most of the musicians that play with me have our first record, you know, and so they know those songs. So it's not really like they're stepping into, you know, working with me blindly. And they're, you know, most of them are, you know, bless them, they're so talented that, you know, they spend hours and hours and hours learning the songs even before we show up for rehearsal. So that's a great thing as well. But yeah, it's usually about 3 or 4 days worth of rehearsals and just kind of running over the songs that are challenging or maybe difficult for somebody to figure out their part or whatever. But it's pretty basic. I mean, I like to really kind of fly by the seat of my pants anyways. I find it's far more interesting for me and the audience if we don't really go in there as a polished, you know, piece of metal. I like kind of rough edges and things, and I think it makes it a lot more fun.
Oh, I agree completely. I would much rather see that kind of a show.
Yeah,
Now,
I think it lends itself to what's the word? Yeah, it lends itself to be way more interesting. You know, we don't run tracks, we don't do any of that stuff. We play all the parts, and if there's a saxophone part or something or a piano part that's not there, you know, it's not there because we're not touring with that musician. But yeah, it's just, I think it's far more interesting.
do you like to change up the set list from night to night too? Because I know if you got like some hardcore fans who want to come see you at different cities, it's really better for them too.
Yeah, we switch it up every night. We don't. That's why we also don't tour with a light guy and stuff like that, because light guys don't like that. You know, they want to program what they program and they want you to play that set. We don't do that. And it also makes it more interesting for us as a band. You know, if we haven't played something off of Lucy, you know, maybe for the past 7 or 8 shows, we'll throw in Lucy, or we'll throw in Best Friend, or we'll throw in Simple Lessons or Drown or something like that, just because we want to make it interesting for ourselves and we want to enjoy the show just as much as our audience does.
Exactly. Now, talking about more recent what's going on, the 2018 show for the 25th anniversary of the debut album. Now, what was that like for you?
It was a blast. It was nice to catch up with the guys again. You know, I mean, everybody's, you know, we're all obviously growing older every single day. But we have just, you know, that first album was so magical for us, and for so many people, you know, such a great audience of fans that have grown with us over the years with that record. You know, you don't sell 7 million records worldwide and you know, have people forget about you. You when you put that thing back together, people flew in from all over the world to see those shows, which was just great for us. You know, I mean, to do 2 nights in our hometown of Seattle at the great theater of the Paramount, with 3,200 of our closest friends, was great. I mean, it was funny. We did 3 nights worth of rehearsals in a tiny little rehearsal studio, and you know, kind of chuckling over what we had accomplished over, you know, whatever 25 years, but when you set foot on that stage in front of those people, it's an entirely different emotion. You think you know what it's going to be like, and then it's entirely different. I mean, it's so much greater and more welcoming than you expect it to be, and just a real joy. And even the mistakes that you make on stage, are natural and fun. And we never really took ourselves so serious that anybody got in trouble for playing a wrong note or anything like that. So I think that's also kind of why we've just had such great success as a band for now 30 years now.
It sounds because, like, to me, that just the fact that you guys are doing it for the love of doing it and not about all the other stuff that can come along with it, that's probably a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean, money comes and goes, and we don't, it's not like, let's go play these two shows so we can make $100,000 each or something like that. It was just like, it's 25 years of our album, and we should play these shows for our fans, that have allowed us to still be here. And the respect we have for one another as well, I think is what makes it easy to get together and play those shows, and fun, I mean, nobody plays drums like Scott Mercado. Nobody plays bass like Barty. Nobody plays guitar like Pete, and nobody sings like me. I mean, we're four incredibly independent and individual human beings that somehow, got together and made a record that to this day, still pays my rent. That's crazy to me.
Now, the first album in 5 years, Wolves, came out in September. Now, was that something that was already planned, or was it a result of the creativity during the pandemic? What were the songs about for you?
No, we had actually recorded that album in August of 2019. So it was ready to go. I did the vocals in January of 2020, and the record was mixed and mastered and ready to come out August of 2020. So that album was waiting around and sitting there gathering dust for an entire year, maybe even 2 years if you really want to look at it. But that song, that album, and the songs on that album are all inspired by the experiences from 2017 to the point of I was doing the vocals in January 2020. All inspired by experiences that I've had, or life in general, the things that I was watching going on around me. And I'm not a big fan of the former president's policies and followers. It's something that I find disgraceful and non-democratic. And so there are a lot of songs on this record that deal with that. There's also a lot of songs on Wolves that are about my life and my relationship with my wife and my son, and the experiences that we've had together. Natalie and I have been together now 20 years. Our son's about to turn 14. All those things are represented on this album, and also this dysfunctional relationship I have with myself. It's all represented on this album. So it's really, in my opinion, it's the best Candlebox record. It's better than the debut, but again, that's just my opinion. But I think that there's so much on Wolves that is interesting and musically beyond what I would have even imagined as a young 22-year-old, 23-year-old kid making music. I mean, now that I'm 52 years old, I've learned so much. And if I could go back and tell my younger self anything, it would be just have more fun with your songwriting. Don't be so I guess focused on what's important as to what you feel. Now I write entirely from the heart. Back when I first started, I was more interested in writing interesting chord progressions, or interesting chord changes, or parts, or how drum parts worked against a rhythmic pattern of a guitar pattern, sort of thing. Now I just kind of roll with it.
That's interesting. And that's good advice for songwriters as well, you know?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you want to have a great hit song. That's not that's not really good
Well, you take a little bit from
advice.
everything, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, myself as a songwriter too, I would always, if that chorus wasn't sticking, wasn't catching, I'd throw it out.
Mm.
The melodic wise, you know, like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I think that's important if you're trying to write a commercial hit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But definitely good advice for somebody as they're seasoning themselves into a songwriter over time, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Those
thank you.
are
Yeah. I mean, seasoning yourself is great. That's a great way to
seasonings.
put it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, what happened during the pandemic? Were you creative? Did you write some more? What do we have to look forward to coming up?
No, I wasn't very prolific. We did a couple cover songs. We did the Loverboy cover song, Turn Me Loose, which was a lot of fun. We did
Nice.
For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield, which was, great. Our plan was to do an album of protest songs because I was just so disenchanted with, you know, the way that 45 was leading the country, and
Mhm.
and it's just really, I don't understand. I still can't comprehend what happened. And it's not that I agree with the way that Biden's running things either. That's a whole other subject. But at least democracy is in play again.
Right.
But I think that, for me, the plan was, I had approached the guys about doing a full album of protest songs, but the problem was we're all over the place. There are only three of us that are in Los Angeles. Two of us are on the East Coast, and getting those songs to kind of go back and forth and producing them, it's not easy. I mean, if we all lived in the same place, it would have been a hell of a lot easier because we could have just gone down to somebody's studio and recorded these things and knocked them out in 24 hours. But we tried, and we just couldn't get it together. It's really hard to motivate yourself when you're not in the same room with somebody. And I'm,
Mhm.
again, I have guitars laying around the house that, are gathering dust because I'm not inspired right now. I don't make records until I'm inspired to make records. And that happens for me about every 3 to 4 years. So, I have ideas. I have some things that I've worked on. We have, 6 songs that are in process of being finished, but the plan isn't to get into the studio and record those anytime soon. I had hoped to be recording in January of this year and February of this year, but it's just not in the cards right now for us. So it just happens.
And it will. And it's good that you don't force it because
I just
it's
don't
better
like,
when you
I don't
don't.
like forcing anything. Yeah. I don't like
Yeah.
forcing anything.
Now, to wrap things up, I always like to ask everyone this silly question. What food, clothing item, toy would make you nostalgic for the 90s? Any of those types of things.
Wow. Well, I have all the flannel that I could ever need. I have all the Doc Martens I could ever need. Gosh, I don't know. I would say, nostalgic for the 90s. It would be it would be a concert, really. There's something missing from the honesty of the performances from, the early 90s, like 90, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93.
Mm.
And, when I went to see Drop in the Park, Pearl Jam put on in Seattle, was one of the greatest shows I'd ever seen. Lollapalooza, the first 2 Lollapaloozas were unbelievable. And there's a freedom from those shows, those environments, and the stage diving and all that sort of stuff that went on with those, where the people were so into the music. So I guess maybe it would be, the distractions that we have now with cell phones and how advanced technology has distracted us all from reality and the enjoyment of being in one room together, listening to
True.
music and losing ourselves in that music and that show. I watched the documentary on Woodstock '99 and I just laughed because it's like, God, we lost the plot right around 1996,
Is that the one that
and
train wrecked really hard? Was that the
yeah,
what's yeah.
whenever the place burned down and, some guy
Yeah.
died and girls were being, molested and raped left and right. And, because it was like jock rock all of a sudden. So, yeah, I mean, maybe what makes me nostalgic for the 90s is like if I go see the Foo Fighters, I haven't seen Pearl Jam play in years, but, Soundgarden, I went to see them play when they first got back together here in Los Angeles at the Fonda.
I'm glad you got to
And it just,
experience that. That's wonderful.
yeah. Well, it took me immediately back to the first time I saw them when I moved to Seattle. But the difference was Chris was playing drums when I first saw Soundgarden and he was singing. So it was a different experience. But yeah, I mean, that kind of emotion that you get from hearing those songs, or even, playing now when we play with Stone Temple Pilots a lot, even though Scott's no longer with us. Dean and Robert and Eric and what they've produced as a band over the years, every time I play shows with them, it immediately takes me back to those early days of us producing our first album when we were writing the songs and Stone Temple Pilots Core was out. It's such a great record, and that's kind of, I guess, what I'm nostalgic for is just that honesty and simplicity of rock and roll back then. It's become almost a circus now where you're jumping through all sorts of hoops trying to get people to pay attention to you on stage. I mean, Candlebox never used pyrotechnics. We never have. We never will. It was always a basic lighting system and a lighting rig, and to this day, it's still as basic as it was. I mean, it's just about the music for me, and that's kind of where I've always been. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe if I would step it up to that world of all the fancy flickerings and sort of things that kind of keep people interested in our show, we might be a little bit more successful, but that's not really what the cloth I'm cut from.
It's not necessary, honestly. But I know what you mean. It's like the distraction, everything now is like, you have to catch your attention within seconds or it's gone. It's fleeting. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I am so grateful for this chat we had today, Kevin. Thank you for your time once again.
Oh, my pleasure, Naomi. Thank you.